On a freezing winter morning, Ethan spotted something unusual in the snow. A small dog, barely moving, trapped in the icy landscape. What had brought it here, alone and vulnerable? Was there any hope of saving it? As Ethan stepped closer, he realized this encounter would change everything, for both of them. On a frigid winter morning, the world was blanketed in silence, interrupted only by the crunch of snow under Ethan's boots. The icy wind bit at his face as he walked along the desolate forest trail, his breath forming misty clouds in the air. The landscape was an endless expanse of white, with snow-covered branches drooping under their frosty burden. As Ethan rounded a bend, something unusual caught his eye. A faint glimmer amidst the snow near the path. Squinting through the swirling flakes, he noticed a small, irregular shape, partially buried in the frost. Curiosity mingled with concern as he stepped closer, his heart sinking at the sight before him. Lying encased in a transparent block of ice was a small beagle, its tri-colored fur frozen beneath the icy surface. The dog was curled in a fetal position, its tiny body stiff and unmoving. Beside it, embedded in the same block of ice, was a metal pipe, as if the poor creature had sought warmth from it before the cold overtook it. Ethan's breath hitched. The dog looked lifeless, its eyes tightly shut, yet something about the scene compelled him to act. He knelt beside the frozen figure, his gloved hands brushing away the snow covering the ice. The cold seeped through his gloves as he assessed the situation, realizing the urgency of freeing the animal before it was too late. With trembling hands, Ethan retrieved a small utility knife from his coat pocket and began carefully chipping away at the edges of the ice. The process was slow, and the biting cold made his fingers ache, but he refused to stop. Every chip of ice brought him closer to the dog, whose fragile form seemed to cling to the last shred of hope. After what felt like an eternity, the block of ice began to crack. Ethan worked meticulously to loosen the metal pipe from the dog's side, ensuring he didn't cause further harm. Finally, with a final snap, the ice released its grip, and Ethan gently lifted the beagle into his arms. The dog's fur was stiff with frost, its small body alarmingly cold. Without hesitation, Ethan wrapped the dog in his scarf and tucked it inside his heavy coat, cradling it against his chest. He could feel a faint warmth emanating from its tiny frame, a fragile sign of life that fueled his determination. Without wasting another moment, Ethan set off through the snow, his pace urgent. The wind howled around him, and the trail seemed endless, but he pressed on, driven by the desperate need to save the dog. Each step was a battle against the elements, but Ethan's resolve never wavered. After what seemed like hours, the sight of the veterinary clinic emerged through the snowfall. Ethan burst through the doors, his voice trembling with urgency. "I need help! This dog! Please, save it!" The warmth of the clinic was a stark contrast to the icy grip of the forest, and as the veterinarians rushed to take the frozen beagle from Ethan's arms, he finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. Watching as the medical team sprang into action, Ethan's mind raced with hope and fear. Though the dog's condition was dire, Ethan had done everything in his power. Now all he could do was wait and pray that this tiny creature would survive the cruel grip of winter. The veterinary clinic was a flurry of activity as the veterinarians examined the small frozen beagle Ethan had brought in. The warm, sterile environment seemed to envelop the tiny dog, whose frail body still clung to life despite the harshness it had endured. Ethan stood nearby, watching anxiously as the veterinarians assessed the extent of the damage. "This little one is a fighter," Dr. Marcus, the lead veterinarian, murmured as he carefully placed the dog on the examination table. "But the frostbite is severe. We'll do everything we can." Ethan's heart ached as he looked at the dog, now lying motionless on a heated blanket. Its fur, once stiff with frost, was slowly thawing, revealing patches of raw, damaged skin. The veterinarians worked quickly, their movements precise and deliberate. They monitored the dog's shallow breathing, administered warm fluids, and carefully cleaned its frostbitten areas. Hours passed in tense silence. Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the tiny creature. Even in such a vulnerable state, it seemed to exude a quiet strength, a will to survive that Ethan found deeply moving. Finally, Dr. Marcus approached Ethan with a solemn expression. "We've managed to stabilize the dog, but the frostbite is worse than we anticipated. To save its life, we'll need to amputate part of its tail and some of the tissue on its limbs. It's the only way." Ethan felt a pang of sadness but nodded. "Do whatever it takes to save it." The procedure was delicate and grueling, lasting well into the night. Ethan paced the waiting room, his mind racing with worry. He couldn't help but think about how much the dog had already endured, left to freeze in the snow, clinging to life against impossible odds. Yet, it had survived, and that resilience filled Ethan with hope. When the veterinarians finally emerged, their expressions were a mix of exhaustion and relief. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Marcus said. "The dog has a long road to recovery, but it's alive." Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. As the dog rested in the recovery area, Ethan sat beside it, watching its small chest rise and fall. He thought about the strength it had shown and the second chance it now had. "You deserve a name," he said softly. "How about Bailey?" The name felt right, a symbol of the dog's fight for survival and the bond they were beginning to share. Dr. Marcus interrupted Ethan's thoughts. "Ethan, we'll monitor Bailey for the next 24 hours, but after that, we'll need to decide where it will go. It can be transferred to a shelter or a wildlife rehabilitation center if space is available." Ethan frowned. The thought of Bailey, now missing parts of its tail and limbs, struggling to adapt in an unfamiliar environment, was unbearable. The idea of leaving the dog to face its challenges alone felt wrong. "No," Ethan said firmly. "Bailey's coming home with me. I'll take care of him." Dr. Marcus raised an eyebrow but nodded. "It's a big responsibility, Ethan. Bailey will need constant care, physical therapy, and a lot of patience." "I know," Ethan replied, his determination unwavering. "But he deserves a chance, and I'll do whatever it takes." The next day, Ethan returned to the clinic to bring Bailey home. The dog was still weak and groggy from the surgery, but its eyes fluttered open as Ethan gently scooped it into his arms. "We're going home, Bailey," he whispered. Back at his small, cozy house, Ethan prepared a comfortable space for Bailey near the fireplace. He lined the area with soft blankets and pillows, creating a warm haven where the dog could rest and heal. Bailey, though fragile and timid, seemed to relax in the safety of its new surroundings. As Ethan sat beside Bailey, he couldn't help but reflect on the events of the past 2 days. This little dog had already endured so much, yet it had survived. It was a testament to resilience, to the will to keep fighting, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Ethan reached out to gently stroke Bailey's head. "We're in this together now," he said softly. "I won't let you down." Thus began their journey of recovery, a path filled with challenges but also hope. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of purpose, a connection that reminded him of the strength found in compassion and the transformative power of giving a second chance. The soft glow of the fireplace bathed the small living room in warmth as Ethan gently placed Bailey onto a makeshift bed he had prepared. Layers of soft blankets and cushions lined the floor, forming a cozy nest where the fragile beagle could rest and recover. Bailey, still weak and hesitant, curled into a small ball, its injured limbs tucked closely to its body. Ethan knelt beside the dog, his hand hovering briefly before gently stroking its head. "You're safe now, Bailey," he said softly, his voice carrying a reassurance he hoped the dog could feel. The days that followed were filled with challenges. Bailey's injuries required meticulous care. Ethan had to clean the wounds carefully, apply ointments, and administer medication prescribed by the veterinarian. Each task demanded patience and a steady hand. At first, Bailey would flinch away, its dark eyes clouded with fear. The beagle had endured so much in its short life, and trust was not easily given. Ethan understood that trust had to be earned. He spoke to Bailey in soft, soothing tones, his movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling the dog. During feeding times, he hand-fed small portions of food, encouraging Bailey to eat. It was a slow process, but over time the dog began to respond. One afternoon, as Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor beside Bailey, offering small pieces of chicken, he noticed a subtle shift. Bailey, instead of turning away, leaned slightly toward him. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. "There we go, buddy," Ethan murmured with a smile. "We're making progress." The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Bailey began to wag its tail faintly when Ethan entered the room, the small stump, a hopeful sign of trust returning. The once timid dog started to rest its head on Ethan's lap during quiet moments, seeking the comfort of his presence. Despite the progress, there were setbacks. Bailey struggled to adapt to its new reality, its movements clumsy and hesitant. Watching the dog attempt to stand on its weakened limbs tugged at Ethan's heart, but he refused to let despair take hold. Instead, he encouraged Bailey with gentle words and support, celebrating even the smallest victories. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside, Ethan sat on the floor beside Bailey's bed, reading a book aloud. It wasn't so much for the content as it was for the sound of his voice, which seemed to calm the dog. Bailey's eyes slowly closed, and for the first time it appeared truly at peace. Their bond was not one of grand gestures, but of countless small moments, shared warmth by the fire, quiet companionship during sleepless nights, and the unspoken understanding that they were no longer alone. Bailey's presence began to fill Ethan's home with a sense of purpose and connection he hadn't realized he was missing. As Bailey regained its strength, it began to show glimpses of its playful nature. It would nudge Ethan's hand for attention or follow him with its eyes as he moved about the room. One day, when Ethan placed a soft toy near Bailey's bed, the beagle tentatively reached out with its paw, batting it gently. Ethan chuckled, the sound echoing warmly in the quiet house. "Look at you, Bailey. You're a fighter." Their journey together was far from over, but the fragile bond they had formed was growing into something unshakable. Bailey's trust in Ethan mirrored Ethan's growing commitment to the dog. They were helping each other heal in ways neither could have imagined. As Ethan sat beside Bailey that evening, watching the dog drift into a peaceful sleep, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. What had started as a chance encounter in the snow had become a shared journey of recovery and transformation. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the quiet companionship of Bailey, Ethan realized that their lives had already begun to change, for the better. The first rays of morning light filtered through the curtains as Ethan watched Bailey attempt to take its first hesitant steps since coming home. The beagle's movements were wobbly, its missing limbs a constant reminder of the challenges it faced. Ethan knelt nearby, ready to catch Bailey if it stumbled, his voice steady with encouragement. "You've got this, Bailey. One step at a time." Determined to help Bailey regain its mobility, Ethan explored every option. After consulting with the veterinarian, he decided to try prosthetics. Using his own limited knowledge and the help of online resources, Ethan worked on creating custom prosthetic limbs for Bailey. The process was meticulous, measuring Bailey's stumps, ordering parts, and learning how to assemble them. Each evening, Ethan spent hours researching, driven by the hope of seeing Bailey walk freely again. When the prosthetics were finally ready, Ethan gently secured them to Bailey's legs. The dog looked up at him, uncertain but trusting. "Okay, buddy," Ethan said, crouching low. "Let's give it a try." Bailey took a tentative step, the unfamiliar weight of the prosthetics causing it to falter. The beagle's frustration was evident as it tried again and again, only to collapse each time. Ethan's heart ached as he watched Bailey struggle. He knelt beside the dog, gently stroking its head. "It's okay, Bailey. We'll figure this out." Despite Ethan's efforts, it became clear that the prosthetics were causing Bailey more discomfort than progress. Ethan made the difficult decision to set them aside, realizing that Bailey's recovery needed a different approach. "We'll try something else," he said softly, determination still firm in his voice. Ethan began to make adjustments to his home to better accommodate Bailey's needs. He laid soft mats across the floors to cushion Bailey's movements and installed small ramps to replace steps, allowing the dog to navigate its surroundings more easily. Each change was made with Bailey's comfort in mind, and the dog seemed to appreciate the effort. Slowly but surely, Bailey began to adapt. One afternoon, as Ethan sat on the couch, he watched Bailey make its way across the living room. The dog's movements were cautious but purposeful, its resilience shining through. When Bailey reached the edge of the mat, it paused, looked up at Ethan, and wagged its tail. Ethan's face broke into a smile. "That's my fighter." Over time, Bailey's confidence grew. The beagle began to explore its surroundings with curiosity, sniffing out new corners of the house and even attempting to climb onto low platforms Ethan had set up. Though its movements were not as fluid as they once might have been, Bailey's determination was inspiring. It was as if the dog had decided that its limitations would not define its spirit. Ethan couldn't help but marvel at Bailey's progress. The dog's playful nature, once buried under layers of fear and pain, began to emerge. Bailey would nudge Ethan's hand to play or bat at a toy with its paw. One day, Ethan found Bailey attempting to pounce on a soft ball, its excitement bringing a burst of laughter from him. "You never give up, do you?" he said, shaking his head with admiration. Though the journey was far from easy, each small milestone brought a renewed sense of hope. Bailey's natural resilience reminded Ethan of the strength found in persistence. The dog's progress also inspired Ethan to reflect on his own life, how setbacks could be overcome with patience and effort. One evening, as Bailey curled up beside Ethan on the couch, the two shared a quiet moment of companionship. Ethan gently stroked Bailey's fur, his mind filled with gratitude for the unexpected bond they had formed. In helping Bailey heal, Ethan realized he was also healing himself, finding purpose and joy in their shared journey. Bailey's playful antics and determined spirit brought warmth and laughter into Ethan's home. The little beagle had come so far from the frozen, fragile creature Ethan had found in the snow. Together, they were proving that recovery wasn't just about overcoming challenges, it was about finding strength in each other and celebrating the moments of progress along the way. The winter snow had long melted, giving way to the crisp bloom of early spring. In Ethan's small town, the story of Bailey, the resilient little beagle, had become a beacon of hope. Neighbors who once knew Ethan only in passing now stopped to ask about Bailey, their faces lighting up as he shared stories of the dog's remarkable recovery. Ethan's home, once a quiet and solitary place, now buzzed with activity. Friends and family visited often, drawn not just by Bailey's story, but also by the newfound warmth in Ethan himself. The once reserved man now wore a smile that reflected the joy Bailey had brought into his life. "You'd be amazed," Ethan would say, "at what a little dog can teach you about perseverance." Bailey's progress continued to inspire awe. The beagle, now stronger and more confident, had adapted to its unique mobility challenges. The ramps and mats Ethan had installed were now Bailey's personal playground. The dog would dart across the living room, pounce on its favorite toys, and nudge visitors with playful enthusiasm. Despite its physical limitations, Bailey's energy and spirit were boundless. One sunny afternoon, Ethan decided to take Bailey for its first outdoor adventure since its recovery. He had crafted a custom harness and leash that ensured Bailey's safety. The two ventured to the local park, where the sight of the little beagle exploring the grassy fields captured the attention of onlookers. Children pointed and smiled, while adults marveled at the dog's resilience. "Is that the dog from the story?" one passerby asked. Ethan nodded with pride. "This is Bailey," he replied. "He's a fighter." Word of Bailey's story spread further, eventually catching the attention of a local newspaper. A journalist visited Ethan's home to interview him and meet Bailey. The article, titled "From Frozen to Fearless, the Story of Bailey the Beagle," painted a vivid picture of their journey. It highlighted not only Bailey's courage, but also Ethan's unwavering dedication to giving the dog a second chance. The story sparked a wave of compassion in the community. Donations poured into local animal shelters, and several families adopted rescue animals after hearing about Bailey. The town rallied around the message of hope and kindness, inspired by the bond between Ethan and his little companion. Ethan, however, remained humble. To him, Bailey was more than just an inspiration. Bailey was family. Each day, as the beagle greeted him with a wagging tail and playful energy, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. "You saved me as much as I saved you," he often whispered to Bailey during their quiet moments together. As the months passed, Bailey's antics continued to bring laughter and joy to Ethan's home. The beagle became a master of hide and seek, often tucking away small toys only to excitedly retrieve them. Visitors to Ethan's house were greeted by Bailey's boundless affection, the little dog a living testament to the power of resilience and love. On one particularly beautiful evening, Ethan and Bailey sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the world felt at peace. Bailey, now comfortably resting its head on Ethan's lap, let out a contented sigh. As Ethan looked down at the dog who had changed his life, he thought about the journey they had shared. From the icy grip of a winter storm to the warmth of this very moment, their bond had transformed not only their own lives but also those of everyone around them. Bailey's story wasn't just one of survival. It was a story of hope, compassion, and the extraordinary connection that can grow between a man and a dog. Ethan smiled, running his hand gently over Bailey's fur. "We've come a long way, buddy," he said softly, "and the best is yet to come." With that, the two sat together in the fading light, content in the knowledge that they had not only found each other, but had also become a source of inspiration for a world that sometimes needed reminding of the strength found in kindness and second chances.